I'm joined from Pakistan by Dr. Rehiana Ali. How are you doing? Can you hear
I'm
me?
okay, actually. Yeah, I can, and thank you, Crispin, for having me on again. I'm okay. It's been a stressful and busy few months, both with the Pakistani legal system and then having to contend with the General Medical Council and the Israeli lobbies.
Well,
But
can you tell us why are you in Pakistan at the moment?
So basically, in March 2022, on the 11th or 12th of March 2022, my brother was assassinated. Actually, that word assassinated is not a word that I chose, actually. It's a word that was used by the High Court judge in Islamabad. And I've been trying to pursue justice since then. So I've had a situation where my brother, I believe, was poisoned. His body was left in a room of a four-star international hotel for 5 days. There was no room service, no housekeeping. They didn't take their bill for 6 days, which was due. And then so just to keep it brief, I was in the UK and my brother and I shared a credit card. And on the 14th, I was due to pay the bill. And I noticed that there was no hotel bill on it, which I thought was very odd. Because we would talk 2 or 3 times a week, and we would talk at length. Like our conversations would go on for 1 to 3 hours. Like they were not brief conversations. But that week we hadn't talked as frequently, and I thought it was odd that the bill hadn't been paid. And I began to send him a message and emails, and I wasn't getting a response. And I would ring his phone, I wasn't getting responses. So eventually, on the 16th of March, the morning of the 16th of March, 4:30 UK time, I rang Pakistan. I rang the hotel. They recognized me because I'd been there before the previous year, and I asked. I really just wanted to know if my brother was still there, and that was confirmed. So I went off to work. I had a long clinic, and about midday on the 16th of March UK time, I got a call while I was doing clinic saying you're from the hotel, from the police officer, saying your brother was dead. And obviously we left immediately, went to Pakistan, and I was in Pakistan for most of that year with my parents and my sister. And we've had obstruction after obstruction, so the police wouldn't investigate. They wouldn't even give the first step, which we need for the investigation. I had to go to court. So I've been to court repeatedly in Pakistan to get this first information report. Then they wouldn't investigate. I was back in court. Then when the first step of the trial, it was kind of, again, without any explanation, was rejected. I went to the Islamabad High Court where I was there for about 10 months. And it was ruled in August 2023 that there was suspicion. There was definitely a need for a full trial, murder trial, of the hotel staff and the complicit police officers. And so that was due to happen in the Sessions Court. And then since September 2023, that's where I've been. So there have been delays at the court while they've been trying to get these people to attend, give bonds, and again, lots of dragging of the feet until February this year, actually. There was a change of judge and he began to have regular hearings, and that's where I've been at. So I gave evidence. In Pakistan, the evidence is that you give a statement, and my statement was probably close to 10 hours, in Pakistan over 4 days, of everything that happened, to put all the facts down for the first time properly. And that's the first time it's been allowed in court. And so I guess we'll see. There's not really been any defense, no explanation. I put an article out. I don't know if I sent it to you. I can't remember. Just in the last couple of days, that there is no defense from the hotel whatsoever. There's no defense. There's no explanation. Because I can assure people that there's no way in this top four-star international hotel called Ramada by Wyndham that your body could be left in a room for 5 days. There's just no way. They serve you water every day. Farouk was ordering every day. He was ordering 2 or 3 times a day. He was going to the executive lounge every day. I've got 10 days of CCTV. You can see all his activity on that CCTV, and suddenly it stops for 5 whole days. And no one at the hotel inquires. And if anyone knows anything about Pakistan, Pakistani Indian hotels, they know that when you stay in a 4-star hotel in Pakistan, this is one of the top 3 hotels, they are attentive to the point of being annoying. Right? You will never get left alone for a whole day without someone knocking on your door. And so they've lied about everything, without going into all the detail, lied about, the do not disturb sign on the door that clearly was off. There were power cuts. and you can see that that means that they should have knocked on the door. Like that's what they ordinarily would have done. But nobody went near this door. And the only reason that I think that they wouldn't have gone near this door is because they knew my brother was already dead. So
Well,
I've been.
can I just ask, what was it that you think, why would someone want to kill your brother?
Yeah, so this is I mean, for people who don't kind of, I mean, there's a long backdrop to this. I don't think that they've killed him just because this isn't just some random murder. That doesn't happen in a hotel as secure as this. You wouldn't be able to get into this hotel without your car being checked and you going through metal detectors and your luggage, everything being checked. My brother was writing politically. He wrote on kind of on the Indian occupied Kashmir. He wrote on politics of Afghanistan and Pakistan under a pen name. And I think that there have been cases and they've been reported, for example, even in Declassified and other. I think you heard about, for example, the Indian activists, the Sikh activists who were targeted by RAW, the Indian Security Agency, and they were killed, for example, in Canada. I don't know if you heard about that. It was certainly in 2023. There have been other cases in Pakistan where Kashmiri activists, but Farooq was an intellectual. I actually think one of his articles was called "The Second Green Revolution in Indian Occupied Kashmir." It was published in Kashmir Media Services, and then it was published in Pakistan Observer. And I think that actually influenced the Kashmiri uprising that people saw in 2015, 2016, when people were waving the Pakistan flag, which is obviously the Green Revolution that he was referring to. And the thing in Pakistan is what I've learned the hard way is that actually you can buy people quite easily. And you can see that in cases like Afia Siddiqui, the American, she's a Pakistani neuroscientist who was working at MIT in America. And she was arrested on Pakistani soil with her three children, and one of her children was killed. And she's been in American jail for 20 years. And all for $50,000. That's all it costs, amongst other things. I mean, this is how cheap it is to commit certain crimes in Pakistan. So these people are the front people. The people currently on trial are the front men, if you like. They did the act. But the level of conspiracy, the level of cover-up from the Islamabad police, from the junior to the senior level, that again would never happen for a UK citizen. The fact that I got no help from the UK authorities whatsoever. I don't know if you were following the case of the young girl Sarah who was killed in the UK and her parents fled to Pakistan, and you saw the behaviour of the British High Commission. And there's also other cases where a British national was killed. The British High Commission behaves in a particular way, but yet we had the door slammed in our faces. And from every MP onwards, all four MPs in Bradford, and then my MP, four MPs, including the one in Leeds, mine at the time was Richard Bergen, Judith Cummings, Naz Shah, Imran Hussain, all refused to assist. Even so we've been pursuing this, without any help. In fact, downright obstruction from the British authorities. In fact, this is something that I will never quite forget when the British official, Jason Smith, said to me that you should really do as you're told. You should listen to what the Islamabad police say. That when I was protesting, I was trying to obviously move things forward here. That he said I should do as I was told, and I said
your brother had died. You were asking for justice, and they said that to you.
Yes. I mean, they've done more than that.
You're British citizen as well, so it's not
yes,
like
my brother is too.
No appeal to people. You have every right to the same support that you'd expect any British citizen would expect from MPs or any police or anyone else.
Yeah, and so basically what I had, and again, I used to have a very good impression of Richard Bergen, was that he refused to meet me at the end, because it was too probably, he didn't know what to say. He wasn't prepared to help. At the first 4 weeks that he was involved, he was very helpful. He promised certain steps and then he backtracked. So I think that this assassination, this murder, has other hands in it. And there's one, it's not. I don't think, I've always said I don't think it's a Pakistani murder per se. I don't think it's coming from the ISI. I think this is a foreign intelligence agency, and I think that they are, money has changed hands, and that's why I'm seeing the obstruction from the British authorities and from the Pakistani authorities. Because I've been everywhere. I've knocked on every single door. And that includes I've been to the ISI headquarters. I've been to the Pakistani protesters outside the Pakistani Prime Minister's house, Supreme Court. This is all going on in 2022, 2023, trying to leverage support to the Azad Kashmir Prime Minister, to the President, trying to meet them and trying to get some assistance. And actually, it's been a uphill battle, really. So we'll see what happens.
You're still fighting now. I mean, you're out there in Pakistan now trying to get justice. Now, look, I need to ask you. I mean, your brother. You said you were on the phone to him most days or every day. You said, I think.
No, usually 2 or 3 times a week. So
two
you
or
got
three
to
times a week. So I'll just say, so you were very close to your brother, clearly. And can you tell us, how are you the same kind of person in terms of being determined to tell the truth? I mean, he was getting into trouble for speaking out there, possibly assassinated for that. Is that something that you both shared?
I think, Farouk, they say parents are important, and my parents are very important in terms of my upbringing. I think Farouk, for me, set the bar. Farouk was was someone who was very conscientious, very moral, and this wasn't someone who would sell out. He was very determined in his own way. And again, there was, people sometimes get the wrong idea. He was in Pakistan. He was writing, and he was doing nothing illegal. But clearly, someone saw him as a threat, and targeted him. And yeah, we were very close. Um, you know, Sometimes it's hard to believe that 3 years and 3 months have passed, but they have, and it doesn't.
Did you play with him when you were young? And what's your age difference?
3 years. So my older sisters, Yasmin, and then there's a 3-year gap between Farouk and then myself, and the three of us were very, very close.
So you're the youngest.
The youngest of us three, and Farouk was, Farouk set the bar. I wouldn't have got into Cambridge, without Farouk in this the sense that it was pretty unusual in the 1980s for a girl from a working class background, particularly of a Pakistani Kashmiri origin, to go to a private grammar school at the age of 12. Farouk was responsible for that in some ways. It was, the fact that I got, 8 A stars and an A at GCSE when they were introduced. Farouk set the bar. He said, "Oh, Rehiana and the A stars are here. And I've got 3 A's. Whereas yours is the 4 A's, and I got 4 A's, and and then it was like, I'm at Imperial. It's at Oxford or Cambridge, and that was someone who set the bar for me, and it was like a shield, and I think that's probably what you notice most of all, that that I don't know how you would have responded. He was the
So
Palestine issue.
when you were growing up, was there a lot of racism around against Asian people in your area? I mean, was he someone who would stand up and support you and things like that? I mean, I can imagine. I have an older brother. He used to help me out when things were. He was about 3 years older than me. He'd help me out when people were troubling.
Yeah, I mean, we were very close. I don't know whether we would expect. I mean, I only remember probably a couple of episodes, of overt racism in Bradford. I mean, like, they were minor. I mean, I had quite a sheltered upbringing, if you like, but Farouk was always there, and he was always there at university, I couldn't have asked for a better brother, and I think that's what you realise, that I was very lucky, and it's he's sorely missed.
So I mean, I'm trying to. I mean, I can't believe how painful it must have been for you to hear that he was dead, that he wasn't there anymore, and then to hear that he'd been assassinated and that they weren't admitting to anything, you were already someone who was politically minded, but your sort of determination for justice, is that something that you had before this, or is that something that's just come up mostly? Have you become more determined for justice since? You're
Um,
sort of more
I suppose
principled
you've
and
never.
determined
I
now.
suppose you've never. Yeah, I suppose it's Crispin. I've never been tested. I mean, of course, there were things that I would, I believed in. I believed in Palestine. I, went on the Iraq march, and I was opposed to war. I was anti-war, and would write about these issues. And we were politically minded, but more on the intellectual side rather than the activist side, if you like. But I suppose already, that background is there. But I think in terms of trying to pursue this case, yeah, I think almost against the odds because I think I don't know what else to do. I mean, what is justice? I mean, it's a little bit looking at the Palestinians, and when you have your whole family decimated, is it really justice? Is it really justice that eventually, Israel will kind of meet its end? I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, my brother's still gone. I think that it's a semblance of justice that actually the people should not get away with what they've done, and that this kind of thing should not be allowed to happen. And I think it's also more important probably in this kind of environment because the attitude is, a lot of most of the attitude I've had from people around me is that you won't get anywhere. And I would disagree with that to some extent. That I think it's possible to get justice. Um, Pakistani courts can work. The judiciary can be very independent. I mean, this is a country, unlike the UK, even, I would argue that they have put prime ministers into prison. They have put presidents and former dictators into prison. So, it's a judiciary. So when you look at it that way around, and yet Tony Blair and the likes have always walked free, despite the war crimes they've committed. So
Yeah.
I think it's possible to get justice, but I think the feeling, the background of the people here is almost like, kind of nothing will happen, and I don't think I can accept that. I don't think I can accept that nothing will happen.
Now, look, I just marvel at how much energy you've got. I mean, you're pursuing justice in Pakistan, but you're also at this time a medically trained doctor. I mean, can you tell us about your medical uh, qualifications and how you got to practice? What have you achieved there?
So I was fortunate. Obviously, I went to state school until I was about 12, and then I took the 12 plus entrance exam to go to Bradford Girls Grammar School. And so, obviously, people probably are familiar with state schools in Bradford, and they weren't very good. So the private school, was an opportunity, and my father, again invested. At that point, I mean, that was probably 25% of his annual salary to send me to a private school. And when I got my grades, I applied to read medicine, and I got a place at Cambridge, which is where I did my medicine. And then I worked, in the south, Bury St Edmunds and Cambridge, and then I worked in also Leeds, Edinburgh. So I have travelled a fair bit. And then I went back to London to do my neurology training at Queen Square in London, and then did my registrar training in Liverpool for 5 years. And I went back to Imperial College. So I went to Imperial College for my PhD, which I did in the stem cells. And I've been a consultant since 2017, since February 2017. And obviously, because of my parents' kind of ailing health, I was locuming, and also it gave me flexibility. But I mainly worked in London, and then I spent some time in Brighton. And then before this happened, I was working actually for over a year in Belfast, which I loved, in Northern Ireland. And then because obviously when this happened, I needed to fly back. It wasn't possible to kind of maintain a full-time job. So I was doing kind of ad hoc work as and when. And so the lobby's attacking me at this particular point when for 3 years I hadn't worked kind of full time. But I think I didn't choose. So you don't choose your battles. I don't. They chose to attack me. And you only have
Can I just get, we don't really want to go into that quite yet, because then that's a totally different thing. But I just want to say, from what you've just said, that's a lot of experience. I mean, you've got years of experience on specialized medical practice here, all over the country. I mean, Belfast, it's almost like a tour of the whole of the United Kingdom you've got
Yeah, I
there.
think I like moving. I mean, I did actually, and I love Northern Ireland. Belfast was one of the nicest places I've worked, and Liverpool was, lovely. So I don't know, maybe I did get itchy feet, but the point is that I did move around, and I stayed in some places for like kind of a year and a half, and I've always had very good, reviews and very good feedback. And there's a short, so just to and there's a huge shortage of UK neurologists, consultant neurologists. There's a shortage, and there's a waiting list. So if you want to see a neurologist on the NHS, in most places you're waiting at least 12 months.
Could you tell
Um,
me what a neurologist does?
Yeah, so it's the medical specialty concerned with the brain and spinal cord. So so most of our bread and butter stuff would be, all types of headaches. So that kind of includes kind of migraines or more esoteric head types of headaches. Multiple sclerosis, which is my subspecialty, which is inflammation of the brain and spinal cord. There's things like dementias, so Alzheimer's, for example, Parkinson's disease, movement disorders, and then nerve disorders. So when people develop neuropathies, or the spinal cord disorders. So that's my specialty, as opposed to the neurosurgeons who operate. So they'll do the operations and we do the medical side.
Well, I mean, those medical issues are very important. I mean, I know people who've had those conditions, and they are really needing support and assistance and help and expertise on that. So we've come to what's actually going on with your career in that. I mean, you've since what time have you been suspended from practicing?
It's coming on to almost 6 months. So I was suspended on the 20th of December 2024.
What was the allegation for you being suspended?
So the allegation was anti-Semitism, and offensive posts on Twitter. But there's a backdrop to this, is that I had been reported already at least 3 times previously. And in all those 3 instances, the General Medical Council, which regulates doctors, said they did not meet the threshold for investigation. So they had dismissed those complaints. But on this fourth attempt, I had a barrage of organizations attacking me in concert. So this was a collaborative effort, and I suspect my running in the parliamentary election in June last year, intensified efforts against me. I did reasonably well for an independent. I got 10.1% in 5 weeks.
Wow.
And which I suppose it's not easy for an independent to do in a constituency that was mainly white. So it was only, I think, 17% Muslim. So I did well, because I think my flyer went down very well. I said it should be Britain first, not Israel first. That was my slogan. And I was very clear about where I stood on the Palestinian issue. I wanted an end to the Holocaust. And I was very clear on also the usurping of our democracy by Israel lobbies. And I wanted to ban the Israel lobbies. And I think this really did put organizations like the Lawyers for Israel, and during the campaign, the Jewish Medical Association came for me twice. So these 3 complaints were dismissed. And then when it came to November, I think they must have realized maybe an organization at the front wasn't a good idea. So what they did was, and I think this was very coordinated, I had article after article about me in the Jewish News, the Jewish Chronicle. We're talking 7th of November, 8th of November. I think 17th of November was a Telegraph published a piece about me, saying, the
Right.
anti-Semitic NHS doctor. And there were another 2 articles in the Telegraph. The Jerusalem Post came in, okay, And then at the same time, there was then this complaint from a Jewish doctor linked to the Community Security Trust, probably linked to the Jewish Medical Association, um, also sending in their complaints, along with Jewish News, along with Jewish Chronicle, along with the Telegraph, all to the GMC. And what I've seen from the disclosures is that they were actually haranguing the GMC, saying, "Have you started your investigation on this doctor? What are you doing about her?" And I was then the GMC then at that point starts an investigation. So I've probably had one of the quickest referrals, I think, to the interim order tribunal, which is basically where the GMC sends you if they think that you should be sanctioned whilst they investigate. So at the moment, nothing has been proven against me whatsoever. It's all allegations, but I've been sanctioned, and they kind of refused to move that date. So I was actually traveling to Pakistan. At that time, I had hearings in Pakistan, and I had requested effectively 11 working days adjournment, if you like, of the hearing, which they refused to give. Okay. And I had also commitments in January, early January, patient commitments. And so when they suspended me, almost 200 patients had their appointments cancelled because
Wow.
they couldn't wait. And the GMC at the outset had said I was being referred on public interest grounds, and had actually specifically says in that letter that it's not on patient safety. So there was no reason not to let me finish the clinics and actually honor my patient commitments. They just, when they suspended me, my clinic on the 24th of December and everything in January was out of the window. And they've refused, and I can go into I don't want to go into too much detail, but they effectively kind of refused that adjournment and have refused to answer questions as to what's different about this complaint, about tweets that are exactly the same and the same nature as what I've tweeted before. The only thing that was different was that Wes Streeting went on record. Wes Streeting, who's received, I think, close to 30,000, 40,000 at least from the Israel lobbies, from Trevor Chin and I think Mendelssohn. He went on record and saying that the GMC must stamp down on anti-Semitism, right? And so there was a political pressure on the GMC to react to the health secretary. But even prior to that, I sometimes forget this because the GMC's kind of taken over. Even prior to my suspension, I had a trust I was working for, Sunderland, which cancelled my contract without notice. So I was simply just cancelled over allegedly social media posts. But again, somebody somewhere in NHS England found my NHS email, found out where I worked, and went directly to the trust. And then within a week or two of that, before I was suspended, I had my locum company, which is called Medinet. Medinet cancelled me, and yet I've been working with them ad hoc since 2018. And they had nothing but positive things about me, but I was literally a pariah who could not be employed, and was that was it. The contract was cancelled for ad hoc work. So I had these cancellations, and then the articles, and then the suspension. So it was all happening at the same time, around about November and December, and that was a very kind of intensive period where I think one of the managers remarked one day that you're looking a bit tired. And I said, yes, yeah, I am tired. And then obviously when it came out later, I said that was the day when you said I was feeling tired. I was looking tired. And it was because I was just having to deal with all this barrage of emails. Do you want to make a comment to the article that we're publishing about you? Do you want to, the GMC is sending you bundles and bundles of information, and refusing to answer any questions whatsoever. So yeah, it was a very pressured at that point.
Now, look, it's astonishing what you've gone through. It's and how you've responded to it with a 191-page document that you've sent to the GMC, and the people it's been circulated. I've seen a copy of it. You've gone through everything in there. You really don't give up, do you? I mean, you really fight back.
Well, I think I have two options. And I think that one option is and I think, I've spoken to, other people, and I know people, so that there's several medics I now know who have been targeted, and effectively this is an attack on someone's livelihood. The fact that I can't work, some people say, are you getting some pay? And the answer is no. I'm not getting any pay for 6 months. But the issue, I guess, for me is, did I do anything wrong? And the answer is no. And if I didn't do anything wrong, then I don't accept that I can be punished. Because I simply will not accept that this foreign lobby, and it's a foreign lobby, can tell me, a UK citizen, what I can post or what I can't post simply because I say that this Holocaust, this mass slaughter of Palestinian children is wrong. And I stand by that. Killing children is demonic. There's no other word for it. And I think that the GMC, is meant to set standards for doctors, and yet somehow it's punishing doctors for upholding the sanctity of life. And that's effectively what I've done, that actually every life matters. Any doctor, and I think what they're doing is they're trying to use me as an example. This is what could happen. And most people, I understand if you've got, I had to make massive adjustments, to over the last 6 months. But if you particularly got children, people are under pressure, people back off. But there is this sense of outrage. How dare they? How dare they tell me what I can post and who do they think they are? Who do they think? Who does the Lawyers for Israel, the Jewish Medical Association, Jewish News? Who do they think they are that they can dictate to me what I can say and how I can say it, particularly when I've not broken any laws? I think it's that sense of outrage. It's a sense of like, I haven't done anything wrong, and I'm going to stand by what I've tweeted. I didn't tweet anything. I didn't tweet any hatred at all. I would, deny that emphatically. I've been very direct. I've been very upfront about what Israel has been doing, and I don't think anyone should hesitate to criticize a pariah entity like Israel, because the horrors that we're seeing, yesterday, the charred bodies of children, burnt out in the school. I think that, there's something to be said when humanity cannot stop what's happening in Palestine. I think it's that sense of outrage. They don't have a right. They don't have a right to try and dictate terminologies and what things mean when actually there's been no hatred on my account.
Now, can you tell us about your legal case? Because what's happening next? How can you get back into work? What's in the way of that legally? What are the cases coming up?
So when this happened to me, I'll be very brief on this. I did approach my indemnity body, and MKUS, which is meant to represent you when you run into difficulty. Say there was a complaint by a patient, or this situation where you're under investigation. I think in some ways misled me, and I think in some ways I was given bad advice. They advised me to seek an earlier review from the GMC, and and the GMC refused the earlier hearing. And then I was put in a situation where the indemnity body basically told me to wait till June for the hearing. So I effectively told them where to go. But I think that they hadn't served my interests. I think I made a little bit of a mistake. I should have taken the GMC to court applied in January. So in the end, what I've done is I've done an application to the High Court to challenge my suspension. And I did that in April. It's a very lengthy skeleton argument submission and witness statement. And I have, sufficient grounds, like I wasn't heard. They didn't follow due process. They've abused process in my case. And I have a hearing now on the 10th of July. Now, I had hoped that would be in early June. But obviously the earliest date I could get was 10th of July with some delays from the GMC. It's a whole day hearing where I'm going to defend myself. I have nothing to hide, and I don't, I've stuck within the law, and they've abused process, and I should never have been suspended. They could investigate me if they wanted to. I don't think they have a right to investigate on issues that they don't have any comprehension about. I mean, I think on public interest, whether it's over COVID, they've suspended doctors over COVID, people expressing their, opinions on COVID, and they're now, suspending doctors on expressing their opinions on Palestine. It's clear the GMC doesn't have the expertise for this, and they should stick to patient safety, direct patient safety when someone is accused of being a danger to patients.
Yeah.
And so that court case is on the 10th of July in London, where I'll be representing myself. And then
Where is it? Where's the court on that one?
this is the Royal Courts of Justice.
Wow. Okay.
So
And you're representing yourself. Why are you doing that? Is there you want?
so okay, so I'm gonna I'm just going to spout the truth. So obviously MKUS, they admitted in their own council opinion that basically they couldn't get purchase. I'm quoting directly. They couldn't get purchase on why I was suspended or how I was suspended. That was their line. But I think that one of the things I think we've increasingly recognized is that you do have Zionist influences within many organizations. And I think when someone like me puts their foot down and says, actually, I don't accept your gatekeeping, what I've said is actually the literal truth. When I've criticized Israelis, I mean, look at the number of articles that have come out in the last fortnight saying Israeli society, there's a problem. There's a psychopathy, in terms of like just recently the polling data. I quoted some of the polling data, and I'll have more now for the GMC. The polling data, I think, from last week was something like 85% of Israelis basically say that Gaza should be flattened. Okay, I mean this is a public opinion that is so extreme in Israel that you cannot pretend that they are like the British public or like the American public, because I don't think you would get that view in these populations or anywhere else, to be quite honest. I think Israel is quite a unique case, and I don't say that in a flattering way. It's a unique case where there's such a level of extremism that I think people have become quite staggered about how extreme it is when they are organizing tours, what they call genocide tours, to go and watch the bombing of basically Gaza. So they have tours organized. You can go and watch the Gaza being bombed. And so that's the first step, that I think that this suspension was unlawful, and I intend to challenge it. And so MDUS, I gave up on them because they were not prepared, having initially given me that impression in January, having said that they would go for this route if the early review the GMC didn't accept it. They then basically backtracked and said that you should be unemployed for another 3 months, and I found that outrageous. So I did the application myself. I did talk to other lawyers, but again, it all comes down to expense. I've not been working for 6 months. I can't afford tens of thousands to basically on legal fees. And my sister is a lawyer by background, so I have probably the best lawyer on my side who believes in the same things that I do. I spoke to some, and I'm going to just put it out there. You might not like what I'm going to say. I spoke to a number of Muslim lawyers as well, okay, who should really be backing the fact that actually it's been a Muslim doctor being deliberately targeted. I think I'm the first Pakistani Kashmiri consultant neurologist with a PhD, in the UK, and Cambridge educated, and yet they can't face up to the lobby groups. I think that it's kind of embarrassing. It's quite shameful, to be honest. So I just took the bull by the horns. I mean, we can do it ourselves. At the end of the day, I know I have the facts at my disposal. I may not know the exact legal process, but I can argue my case and I can argue my facts. I know my facts.
You certainly do with that 191-page document that you've made up there. You've got all the facts there.
Well, I don't think I can lose. This is my view. I mean, obviously, you never know who your judge is going to be on the day. And we know that most organizations will have pro-Israelis in there, pro-Zionists in there, but I don't think on the facts I can lose. If it's a fair, the GMC has no defense whatsoever. I've seen their defense, the grounds of resistance, and one of them is hilarious. One of them says that I think a few days before the hearing, there was an email sent to them, and actually my sister wrote that email and signed off on it with my permission, was that I will not accept any conditions on my license. Okay, now why did I write that? Well, because I didn't in my wildest imagination think they would be daft enough or balmy enough to suspend a doctor for basically opposing a Holocaust. I thought what they would try to do, and what they have done to other doctors like Samuel White over COVID, was they would try and restrict my free speech. Right? So one of their arguments is that she said she would not accept conditions right? So obviously, what I'm going to go into this IoT with is I will just to make sure I will not have an omission. I will not accept a warning, conditions, or a suspension. So by logic, you cannot possibly give me a warning, conditions, or suspension. I mean, that's the logic of the
Yeah.
GMC Council.
Now the other thing is, you do have a petition though that people you're looking for support on. So we'll put this out there. Citizen Go petition calling for the GMC to reinstate Dr. Rehiana Ali to the medical register. 3,510 have signed as of this interview. So can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so a very good friend, actually, not someone I've known for that long. I met him in Speaker's Corner, Sean, and we've become very good friends. Sean has a very strong, moral compass, and he helped me out in Speaker's Corner when I wasn't getting media attention on my brother's murder case, and I used Speaker's Corner for that because there were YouTubers there, etc. And when the Palestine, and again I was commenting on Palestine at that, and he set this petition up because obviously he was outraged, when I got suspended, and said really that the GMC, and he wrote to the GMC along with other people, testimonials I have, that the GMC shouldn't be doing this, particularly when what I've done is effectively just spoken out against an outrage. So he wrote the petition, put it on Citizens Go, and the reason for that is that Citizens Go is meant to be a free speech platform, and so we want people to just sign, because I suppose the point that I'm making is that I've not been complained about by patients. The only people who've complained about me are the lobby groups, and they haven't even let go. Like, even now I was suspended, I still, along with Dr. Rahme, was in the Daily Mail in February. Prior to that, I think I was in the Times. I was mentioned in the Times. I've had, I think, a total of 3 or 4 articles in the Telegraph in total, Jerusalem Post twice. And then the Lawyers for Israel came back. So I'm suspended. I mean, these people are psychopathic. I'm suspended. And they've come back and said to the GMC, your decision last year was wrong of dismissing this complaint. We want you to look at it again. And it's the same tweets. It's the same tweets that the GMC has previously dismissed. So I think that, people do need to, they won't stop, I think, until we make them stop. And I think that, I'm urging other medics who've been targeted, like, this is, the way, going quiet is not the way to deal with these ghastly organizations, who are attacking UK citizens. I think they needed a dose of their own medicine. And I think they need to be booted out of Britain, because if they're serving, this is my view, if they're serving a foreign entity, then that is a cause for concern for every UK citizen. They cannot be representing a foreign state. And I think, I'm Pakistani Kashmiri of, Pakistani Kashmiri descent. If there was someone and they were always advocating and they were using UK resources to go and lobby for, Pakistan, the UK population has a right to say, well, you're in the UK and actually you're advocating for a foreign state. I think that's a legitimate argument. And the same thing applies for Israel. Like, it cannot be a different standard. It's not anti-Semitic to say that. It's actually a patriotic act. And I think people really should look into the activities of LFI, and I would urge them to do that. I think that's what we're trying to do, look into activities of Jewish Medical Association. The Jewish Medical Association has reported quite a few of us, and they are very closely linked to the Israeli Medical Association in Israel. And I think we have a right to know if any of these doctors have worked in Israel. I know that David Katz has. He worked in Israel before he came to the UK. I think there's an article about him, and there's some details in there that are quite concerning. So I think people need to look at, what are their belief systems. I mean, David Katz, without going into detail, goes to organizations like the Chabad. I've mentioned, I don't know whether I've mentioned Chabad before, but Chabad is a very extreme organization.
Yeah, we had Yael Khan talking about Chabad on the show a few weeks ago. It opened my eyes to that. Now, look, I think I want to say something to you that I think you are one of the most heroic people I've ever met. The
I
stuff
think
that
you're too
you've gone
kind.
through I mean, I can't believe how much you've gone through in the last few years. And the fact you keep fighting and you're determined, you are an inspiration to everyone. And I hope that on the 10th of July, not only do you win your case, but there's a lot of people out there outside the Royal Courts of Justice to show you solidarity and love, because what you've done is incredible. And I hope that, I can't imagine how much of a toll it must be taking on you physically, mentally, all this stuff. But if your spirit's strong, then you'll get through it, and we're all with you.
Thank you. No, thank you. Very generous remarks, and I really appreciate them. Thank you. And I hope people do come on the 10th of July.